Welcome to the BeerBarrel Sports podcast for January 17th, 2016, the first edition of this podcast. I'm your host, Thomas, and along with me is Jeff.
Hey, how's it going?
So we are here to discuss sports each Sunday and to review a new beer every week. So let's kick right into it with this weekend's NFL playoff matchups, starting with the New England Patriots facing off against the Kansas City Chiefs.
Sounds good.
What was your take on the game?
I thought it was pretty interesting. It was a really close game towards the end. The Chiefs really came back and gave a strong effort. I think it was very interesting where Alex Smith was scrambling a lot. I thought that was pretty impressive of him to still be able to try to make some plays, despite giving, he did give a pretty decent performance, even though he threw for just above 50% of his attempts. I don't know. I thought the Patriots though still played better, and they did get some lucky plays, especially the ricochet off Gronk into Edelman's hands for the first down there. So I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, it clearly showed what a difference Julian Edelman makes. Julian Edelman being healthy again gave Tom Brady a vital weapon back. Gronk being at near 100%. I wouldn't say he's necessarily back at 100% yet, but near 100%. So it gave, again, Brady another huge weapon back. The Patriots look good. They looked really good.
Yeah, I mean, there were several reports before the game saying that Gronk was going to be limited. So I was kind of surprised of how useful Gronk was. I mean, he wasn't the top receiver, but he's had 7 receptions or 83 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't see how he was considered limited in this game.
It also helps that the Patriots didn't bother running the ball much.
I know. I mean, Steven Jackson only had 6 attempts for 16 yards, and he was the lead runner. And 16 yards, I mean, really, what does that get you? I think Brady even had the rushing touchdown, and if you saw the play where he hit the pylon and Belichick tried to challenge it, supposedly his hip touched the pylon, but of course the play stands. There wasn't enough to overrule the call. So,
and the fact that the team total had 38 yards. So your best runner had 16. That's not a good rushing offense, but Brady threw for 300 yards. Their passing offense was on point. Edelman had 10 receptions for 100 yards. Gronk had 2 touchdowns. So the Patriots looked like a well-oiled machine to move on to the AFC Championship round next week. And rather than switching to the NFC game on Saturday, let's talk about tonight's AFC divisional matchup between Pittsburgh and Denver, so that we can kind of look at who New England has to face next week.
Sure. I mean, just kind of recapping the game, I thought it was a great game. You know, the Steelers played really, really well. They had the lead for the majority of the game. It's a tough game to play when your number one receiver, Antonio Brown, is out for this game due to his concussion from last week's game against the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, that's such a rough. It's just really difficult to play. And Mike Tomlin was the coach of the Steelers, was asked before the game about how they're going to react without their number one key playmaker, and they did perform really well even without him. Martavius Bryant, Marcus Wheaton, they still had good numbers, especially Martavius Bryant, both receiving and rushing. The couple of reverses that were really key plays for the Steelers in this game.
Yeah, not only the Steelers' number one receiver, but probably number 1 or number 2 receiver in the league. That could be up for debate, but I would put him personally number 1. Martavis Bryant had to make up for that. He was targeted 15 times. So Roethlisberger was clearly down a major weapon. And the Steelers looked good early. They had the lead for the majority of the game. They were leading going into the end of the third quarter, I believe. They were still up.
Mm-hmm.
And Denver scored and just, kept that lead. Denver held on. Peyton Manning looked good in his return to starting. Brock Osweiler had finished out the regular season starting for them, but when you come to the playoffs, you obviously have to go with the veteran hand, and Peyton Manning looked good. He looked like typical Peyton Manning playoff playoff football.
I don't know if I would say that so far, because one of the surprising things about this, even though, Ben Roethlisberger, who I think I heard Phil Simms or Jim Nantz say during the broadcast, was, Ben Roethlisberger, I think, was the only quarterback during the regular season where a quarterback had over 300 yards passing against the Denver defense. So I thought, and he did it again. He had 339 yards in this game. But what was really surprising to me was both quarterbacks, and both elite quarterbacks, no one had a touchdown. So it goes to show that the defense really was strong and really held it in for both teams.
Yeah, your touchdowns were from Fitzgerald Toussaint, the backup running back for the Steelers since D'Angelo Williams is out, and C.J. Anderson, who had a disappointing regular season, but gave the Broncos the touchdown they needed this week. And Brandon McManus had himself a hell of a game.
Yeah.
5 field goals? I think 5.
I think it was 5, yeah.
So.
But, the other thing about, and I don't think Peyton Manning's fault, but there were a lot of key plays that the Broncos should have had, especially early on. And I mean, C.J. Anderson was a big culprit of a lot of those drop passes. A couple of them were to Hillman as well. Those are key plays where they were wide open and they should have had those catches. For some reason, also, even though the defense played pretty well, there were still a lot of open players on the field, and I think that was for both the weaknesses for both teams.
So New England and Denver will face off next weekend. We get Tom Brady versus Peyton Manning.
It's in Denver, so let's see if it's going to be snowing.
The NFL's dream matchup. The NFL is elated anytime you can get Manning versus Brady, because then the media for that entire week doesn't have to talk about Patriots versus Broncos. It's Brady versus Manning.
It's true.
It's like there's no other players on the field. My feelings on that upcoming game. Denver just does not look like the Denver of old. New England looks. Like I said, like a well-oiled machine moving forward.
They're definitely the healthiest that they've been in a long time this year.
And not only on the offensive side, but on their defensive side. So their defense looks fairly healthy. Their offensive line had Sebastian Vollmer back, who didn't play last week. Their last regular season game. With Brady having protection, I think the Patriots could fairly easily overpower Denver, considering Denver also had issues today facing Pittsburgh.
And you can catch that game for sure next week at 3:05 Eastern Time on CBS. Check your local listings for channels.
And is that Saturday?
I think so. No, it's Sunday, actually. No,
Sunday. Okay. So with that, we move to the NFC game from Saturday. The Green Bay Packers against the Arizona Cardinals. Hell of a game, huh?
That was an amazing finish by the Cardinals. It was a good effort on both teams. I think Rodgers played really, really well. Both quarterbacks, even though Homer threw for 2 interceptions, they still had a decent stat line. They still threw for at least 2 touchdowns each. That Hail Mary again, I don't know how Rodgers does it. Jeff Janis, takes credit to that as well. But the second time, at least this season, at least I've seen, get a Hail Mary. One, I think, was to win the game during the regular season, but in this playoff game, it was to tie the game. I still think that's really impressive and not an easy thing to do for any quarterback.
And not only was that Hail Mary, did Jeff Janis receive that Hail Mary, he also had a 41-yard completion the play before that to get them in any position for that last play. Or was it 61? Either one, 61, 41. There was 2 plays in that 2-play span of time where Jeff Janis was really the hero. After making a pretty vital drop earlier in the game, so he really made up for it. Carson Palmer looked real rough. He finished well, That was the thing. The play to Fitzgerald in overtime, to open overtime, where Fitzgerald went 75 yards downfield. Palmer got lucky. I mean, he did a nice Madden-esque spin move to get away from the defense. So he did a good job evading, but his passes all game looked real rough.
That ricochet too off of the Steelers player's arm there. That was really key play too. I mean, that gave him one of his touchdowns.
You mean Packers?
Sorry, Packers. Yeah, wrong team. Sorry.
But yeah, no, he had. I mean, Sam Shields. Sam Shields had two opportunities and dropped both, like dead in his hands, like a receiver, perfect hands, and dropped both. So Palmer, comes out looking good because he got the win. The second half of the game for Fitzgerald was huge. He looked like regular old Larry Fitzgerald, 32 years old, showed the speed he still has. He had 6 yards in the first half. And what did you finish with? Over 150?
176
total. Yeah, he had a very, very good game for the Cardinals, and is the major reason why they won that game.
I think one of the weak points too to comment was the Randall Cobb catch. I mean, first of all, the catch was amazing. I have no idea how he did that. The Odell Beckham-esque catch was phenomenal. And it just really hurts the Packers to lose such a vital player. First of all, the play didn't count due to offsetting penalties. There were 3 penalties on the play, and that really hurt it. And not only that, he gets I think it was a bruised lung or something.
Yeah, that's what kept him out of the game.
Yeah, so one of your key wide receivers, that really hurt the Packers, especially towards the second half.
The thing with the Packers in this game, I didn't know who Jeff Janis was. I didn't know who Abradaris was. I know James Jones only because he had a great season, even though he couldn't latch on with the team in preseason. So he came back to the Packers, and Rodgers made him look like a superstar again. But Green Bay just couldn't pull it off. Rodgers worked his magic again. Arizona showed that their defense is a force to be reckoned with, and they'll be moving on to the NFC Championship game against, as we discussed the next game, Sunday's game, the Seahawks versus the Carolina Panthers, which the Carolina Panthers prevailed, although luckily. So if you want to start on that one.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, final score is 31-24. But, the Panthers, the first half of this game, were dominating. It was 31-0 going into halftime, which is impressive. 2 touchdowns, I believe, from Jonathan Stewart, who ended with 106 yards on the ground, and a Luke Kuechly pick 6 that really helped them in that first half. The Seahawks, I gotta say though, they really fought hard, and they're always kind of known to be that team to kind of come back and they come back fighting, and so that's 24. They answered the Panthers 31 points with 24 key points. That really kind of scared. There was even a quick play I think after one of the last touchdowns that the Seahawks scored. Cam Newton starts getting a little worried, like we got to do something here. Surprisingly enough, the Seahawks defense came back. And they came back strong, holding the Panthers. They didn't score anything after. And I want to make one other point. I thought it was interesting during the halftime. I believe it was Howie Long it was Terry Bradshaw who made a comment saying, I don't think the Seahawks are going to be able to pull it off. And though they didn't win, I think to come back 24 points strong like that is really, really impressive. And got to give the Seahawks credit for their really strong attempt on the comeback.
And beyond that, it wasn't really Cam Newton that beat them. Jonathan Stewart had over 100 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. They kept Newton completely confined in the backfield. He didn't rush for even a yard on 11 attempts. But he was still Cam Newton. He threw for a touchdown. Was obviously responsible for leading Carolina's charge in the first half to go up 31-0. But like you said, the Seahawks had a hell of a comeback. All it came down to was that onside kick attempt that they just couldn't reel in. Greg Olsen Yeah, and so Cam Newton's had a rough season with offensive weapons, similar to what Rodgers ended up with at the end of his game, and then what the Steelers were dealing with without Antonio Brown. Kelvin Benjamin's been out all season, and Cam Newton's been working magic with the players he has. Devin Funchess, Ted Ginn, Greg Olson's been the major catalyst on the offensive side, receiving wise, and they look like they only lost one game in the entire regular season. They look like a very tough team to beat. So I say Arizona's going to have their hands full. What did you have to say?
I was going to say, one player, two players I want to call out here. Marshawn Lynch, I don't know what happened to him because, Seahawks have always been a running team, and I've been really surprised. I know he hasn't been himself this year, but, he was only held to six attempts, 20 yards. Russell Wilson had at least, more yards than him, which isn't unusual, I guess, for Russell Wilson. But still, for Marshawn Lynch, this key player who I think wasn't he top 5 running back last season? You kind of expected something from him, and I was a little disappointed on him. However, on the other side, I think it's Tyler Lockett, who had some really, really key plays in this game. He's a rookie this year. Broadcasters even called it out. He didn't, especially on that play where was it challenged or reviewed at least, where they were questionable whether it was a catch because he had 2 feet in. That's a veteran play right there, and you don't see that very often from rookies. So he's definitely a key receiver for any team in the future, but for right now, specifically with the Seahawks.
And beyond that, Carolina's defense. Carolina's defense, despite giving up 24 points in the second half, had 5 sacks and 2 interceptions. They really got to Russell Wilson, disrupted Russell Wilson's game. He ended up throwing for 366 yards, but you also have to think he was throwing the entire second half. It's kind of one of those almost garbage time-esque stat totals where you're just able to throw as much as you want and finish with 366 yards passing.
Yeah.
This is what Russell Wilson gets for not sleeping with Sierra. This is God telling him that you have a gift in front of you and you're saying no, and you're spitting in God's face. This is what Russell Wilson gets. Seattle obviously would have liked to get revenge on New England if they both made it to the Super Bowl, but this is the end for Seattle's run. Could be the end for Marshawn Lynch's career. He had mentioned before the season the thoughts of retiring, so we'll see if he comes back, or likely if he does come back, not with the Seahawks. So we'll see if he even comes back at all. So what is your opinion moving forward of the Carolina versus Arizona game to come next weekend?
I gotta say, it's definitely going to be a great game. Surprisingly, unusually enough, last week we had, I think, all the away teams win, and this week we had all the home teams win. So you can definitely see how the home team advantage could definitely be helpful, especially for the Carolina Panthers. Out of Charlotte, I think Arizona is definitely going to have his hands full. I think Carson Palmer is definitely going to need to make those key plays, make sure to be on target, and, despite his finger injury. But at the same time, I think Bruce Arians has a lot of trick plays up his sleeve, and I think that could really be a key component of beating the Carolina Panthers.
I think it'll be outside of Cam Newton, because he just does whatever he wants regardless. I feel like it's going to be a very heavy defensive matchup. With Carolina having good defense, you have Arizona with good defense. It's going to be, I think, a defensive-heavy game. I think Cam Newton's going to at least rush for a touchdown, if not pass for a couple. Make the home fans happy, giving kids footballs like it's charity. It's one of the coolest things you see after every touchdown.
You should see that girl's face. She was so excited about getting that ball.
It's one of the cooler things that he does. Every touchdown gives a ball to a fan in the stands. I think it's actually almost always kids, if not always kids. So there should be a couple of kids in Carolina getting new footballs next week. If Carson Palmer's not on his game, like he struggled versus Green Bay, if he's not on his game, I could see Carolina pulling away easily. But if he plays a good game, then it could be much closer. I still think Carolina's going to pull it out. Like I said, they've only lost one game through the entire regular season. They looked superb in the first half today and still held on for the win. Arizona's going to have to play a really good game. They're going to need Larry Fitzgerald to step up again. They're going to need more of a running game than they had this week. I still think Carolina's going to hold on. And I personally see a Carolina-New England Super Bowl.
But, yeah, and that's a valid point. And I wanted to say, I mean, I kind of agree with that. I think Carolina has been a really dominating force this year. Not to give, I mean, to be fair, Carolina did lose once, and it was the Atlanta Falcons, who didn't even make the playoffs. So, that was, and they're a divisional component. So to go get a win like this against the Seahawks, and it was a little nerve-wracking towards the end there. But good. That's what I want to look. Kind of revenge for the previous years where the Panthers have lost to the Seahawks, especially in the postseason. So I think that's a key. Hopefully the Panthers, play hard and they have a good game. As for the AFC team, either way, I think right now Tom Brady's looking a lot better than Peyton Manning, especially watching this Pittsburgh game tonight. Especially if Tom Brady has all of his key weapons, I think Tom Brady has a much better chance against the Panthers, and I'm just hopeful that we're not going to have a similar Super Bowl to the Seahawks Broncos game that happened a couple of years ago, especially for the defense the Carolina Panthers do have.
I'm trying to think if there's any other big sports topics. Mel Kiper released his first mock draft. Obviously, New England doesn't have a first-round pick. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I think it should be a pretty interesting year, but I don't think they really need it, to be honest.
It's interesting that of all the things to come out of Deflategate, you get Brady back, but they still lose. Not that it matters, but the $1 million out of or whatever it was out of Kraft's pocket. That first-round pick still hurts, and it's surprising the NFL wouldn't give it back. I don't know if the Patriots will potentially attempt to get it back this offseason, but we'll see if they bother.
One thing I'm surprised if the NFL won't give it back. But, yeah, I mean, obviously it would be helpful. And I think the Patriots tend to use it as a bargaining chip a lot of the time. So, that I think hurts them. But I think they're still such a strong force that they'll be okay.
And it's not as if Belichick needs a draft. He's a mastermind at pulling free agents out of nowhere to come to New England. And players are just happy to come to New England. They love the fans. They love to play here.
T.O. even offered. So, I mean, and Steven Jackson is a great example. When you lose key player, Dion Lewis was a phenomenal force this season, and it really hurt the Patriots to lose him. The Garrett Blunt, who was on the Steelers and then they got cut and then the Patriots picked him back up. He was still such a key playmaker for them this season. He's out for the season. So they go to free agency and pull out Steven Jackson, who was a former running back for Arizona. The Atlanta Falcons before. He's still a key, well-known name, and for coming 2-3 weeks that he's been in here to learn this playbook. He hasn't been doing too bad. He hasn't been doing too great, but hopefully we can see a little bit more out of him, especially within the next couple of games.
I'm going to go ahead and say that New England in the second round will pick an offensive lineman. I think they really need an offensive lineman bad. Just not even for starting purposes, but for depth. Their offensive line was absolutely decimated this year, and it hurt towards the end of the regular season. You got good play out of guys like Shaq Mason. There were a couple other players who stood out, both offensively and defensively, but I think that's their biggest need. And then maybe wide receiver. I know they don't like picking wide receivers early, though, so you could probably see them go to free agency for wide receiver. But yeah, we'll see if Kuiper's correct. He has his hits or misses with his mock drafts. So, and this is the earliest one possible, so we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Besides college football, Alabama wins it all. Good game. Too bad for Clemson not to be able to pull it off at the end, but they'll be back just as good next year. Same quarterback, same running back. The majority of their defense will be back. And Dabo Swinney with his coaching swag in the locker room and his great comeback speeches for his teams. Yeah, Clemson will be back. Alabama is always a driving force. The SEC is the best conference in college football. A lot of people debate it. It's just not debatable. It's a guarantee. SEC is better than everyone else. And then the only other thing I guess would be we could discuss baseball contracts being a hell of a lot higher this offseason.
Yeah.
Zach Greinke, what, 34 million now a year?
Wow.
I saw an article not that long ago that was, could Bryce Harper be the first $500 million contract guy? If contracts keep going up the way they are, it's not really impossible to think that some guy could get a $500 million contract. The Red Sox got David Price. Yoenis Cespedes, I believe, is going or got an offer from the Orioles. I don't think he's decided yet. The Orioles just got back Chris Davis, whose contract they'll be paying till 2037.
2037. Wow.
When he'll be 51 years old. It's similar to the Bobby Bonilla deal. The Mets are still paying him, and he's going to be getting paid, I believe, into his 70s, $1.2 million a year.
Wow. It's unbelievable.
Baseball contracts, no salary cap. There's no limits. So with that, pretty much wrapping up sports for the time being, let's move on to the obviously more important section of the podcast, the beer review. So this week we have Harpoon Winter Warmer. I've had a little bit already. As it says in the back, it was cinnamon and nutmeg. You can definitely taste the cinnamon. You can taste the nutmeg. It's pretty good for winter, personally.
Yeah, I agree with that. It definitely has a nice, crisp flavor to it. It's not, for all you lager drinkers, it's definitely a little bit heavier than that. Definitely has a good kick to it, and that gives it its nice flavor. Was it made in Massachusetts, I believe? Yeah, Boston, Massachusetts, and Windsor, Vermont. You can find it probably pretty often on the East Coast. Check it out if you can find it.
Yeah, but being New England boys, we figured we start with a New England beer.
Yeah, why not?
Like you said, it's a little heavier than a lager, but it's not. The nice thing is it's not super heavy.
No, you're right.
It's very drinkable. It's smooth. It's not. It's I'm trying to think. I've had other winters that are a lot heavier, a little stoutier, a little more closer to a porter, I guess, than a beer or than a regular beer. It's pretty good. I'd say like 4 out of 5 is what I'd give it.
Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna go 3.7.
Why did I not know that number was coming?
I don't know. I thought it was a good number, so
So we should have next week. We should have a lot more football to discuss with those 2 games, but we'll have a lot more to discuss with in terms of moving on to the Super Bowl. We could maybe discuss the Pro Bowl. I don't really care because the Pro Bowl is not that important the way it used to be. Yeah. But possibly talk about some hockey, basketball, more baseball if we have any, if there's any bigger news, and obviously we'll have another beer to discuss. So
absolutely.
With that, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I just want to tell everyone out here, you can always catch us on Google Hangouts is on the air. We're gonna do this live, and hope we take any comments, any questions you guys have, any suggestions for beers. We're always open to hear that. If you guys have any other suggestions for sports or any key comments you want to make, we're all there. You can just check it out and you can post it in the comments below. This will be posted to YouTube later, and you can find it on the podcast. Why don't you talk about that?
We're planning to try to put the podcast on iTunes. That is a work in progress. I will be figuring that out myself with this being the first episode. But anyways, we will likely post, if you don't feel like necessarily going straight to the YouTube page, we do have a website at BeerBarrelSports.com. It's infrequently updated at the moment, but it will be more updated coming moving forward, that's a goal of mine, is to get it back up and running again. So the podcast and video should hopefully both be posted up there. So this was a good first episode, I think.
Yeah, agreed. All right, guys.
As Jeff said, any questions you have, any comments you have, any beer suggestions, anything, feel free to comment on the video, catch the podcast, subscribe, everything like that. And we will see you next Sunday.